Someone make it make sense.
I'll be a couple.
Welcome, 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 guys. We've got some big news here. Angel D. I couldn't have said it better myself. It's in writing. I had just checked the docket a couple hours ago, and this document was not up. And then I thought, well, let me just double check again. And here it is. This will not be a long one, guys, for anyone who's about to go to bed. This is not going to be a long one. However, we finally have it in writing from the court. This is the first time that we've seen this. Any mention of a plea or change in plea. So far, what we had was this. What we had was, well, it'll take a second to load. Actually, I don't know why Chrome's been doing this. Meanwhile, you guys can see that like everything we've got is like everything's business as usual, right? Let's just see here. Business as usual. Come on, won't you load? Well, okay, here it goes. Here it goes. All right. So then we had this, right? So this is the hearing. Now, what's funny is you can tell, let me zoom out. This looks very different than any of the other filings we've seen for hearings. Like it's a different format. There's like, I don't know if you guys can see, but there's like this boxy thing here. Like the kind you would see on like an Excel spreadsheet. It's a bit different. And all it says is notice of hearing. And that's it, right? So again, up until now, we hadn't had anything on the record from the court or any of the parties acknowledging what the fuck is going on. Okay. Until now. This is the filing that just came up. So order approving pool still photographer. You guys ready? The court received multiple requests by various media outlets to video record the change of plea hearing. There it is. Let me zoom in. There it is. It's on the record from the court. The change of plea hearing scheduled for Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. A live stream of the proceedings will be provided by the court on its media streaming account, which I'm glad because part of me worried it was going to be sealed just because you never know with this particular case. Therefore, the various requests by media outlets to independently video record the proceedings are denied. So it's going to be the same type of streaming that we've had before. To ensure that quality still images are available from the hearing, the court will permit a pooled still photographer to be present at the hearing. The Associated Press, having been the first to request still photography access, it will be permitted to provide such coverage as a pooled media resource. The permission to provide such coverage is contingent on the AP agreeing to act as a pooled resource for such photographs for all media entities. The photographer may only take photographs from the location within the courtroom assigned to them by court personnel. Photographs may not be taken of any victims or members of any family members of the victims inside the courthouse. So they can take pictures of the defendant, right? They just can't take any pictures of the victims or family members. Well, look at the wording here. Let me read this sentence again. Photographs may not be taken of any victims or members of any family members. That's redundant. It's supposed to say photographs may not be taken of any victims or any family members of victims, right? That's what this is supposed to say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in for anyone who starts joining us and is like, wait, what? The big thing here, right? There it is. The change of plea hearing. Because so far, again, the hearing was not labeled. It was just hearing, no description. I wonder, can I like edit this and make it, let me see here. What can I do? No, I'm wondering, can I like highlight it? Oh, I can. That is good. Okay, we're going to highlight. Is that a highlighter? No. What is that? Eraser. Oh, that is a highlighter. Why is it weird colors? Anyway, we're going to highlight it. Can I make it? I don't like, why are these all pastels? Whatever. Can I make it this color? Like, why on earth can I not change the color? Oh my God. You guys. I guess I have only this one option. Anyways, unless it's just, what is it doing? Okay. Well, be great if I could change the color. Can I change the size? Nope. Can do that. Alrighty then. It has to be this color. So where was it? The change of plea hearing. Oh my God, this is just dumb, you guys. I wanted to make it bigger, but it wouldn't let me. Oh, well, you guys can see it. There it is. The change of plea hearing. Can I make that go away? Oh my God. Go away. Okay, there we go. Can everybody see? So in case anyone gets there it is. The change of plea hearing in writing. We have it before us. Let me see what you guys are saying in the chat. Oh, Franks is here. Welcome, Frankie Figs, Frank, aka Franks, as I always call her, and have called her for years. Yep, change of plea. The hearing is tomorrow. Yep. And I believe that the hearing will happen probably around the time I take a break, if I can take a break at work. And I'm going to try to be listening as much as I can. I'm going to cover, we're going to cover it tomorrow night, of course, when I get back. And Mary says, I wanted to say thank you, Chelsea, for providing unbiased, awesome case coverages. I've been saving some videos of the ghost hunter guy's wife hiring a hitman. Oh, I'm not familiar with that one. And whatever channel I stumbled upon, I guess, the detective came on and was like, they're fucking stupid, da da da. And she was like, well, calm down, give us the facts. I appreciate that you appreciate the fact that you appreciate the unbiased coverage. I try. I think it's really important, and I'm so glad that you appreciate it and that it is to your liking. Yeah, it was biased and gross. You know, I think a lot of places are like that, or channels, media outlets. I think that biased is what most people. Well, I guess when you're super biased, right? I suppose if your goal is just to like get more views, you can tend to do it that way, because people that agree with your bias are going to watch, and then people that completely disagree are going to tend to watch so they can just disagree. You know what I mean? And it's all just like kind of like based on emotional manipulation, if you will. So I just don't roll that way, as y'all know. So yeah, welcome, Bunny. Happy to see you, my friend. Also, fun thing here, I'll show you guys. I updated my labels at work for my filing system, and I changed everything to Russian. Let me show you guys. This is just fun, in my opinion. So there we go. I changed all my labels to Russian just for fun. There we go. Do. Cyrillic rather, but you know, Russian. So, yep. But let me go back to what I was going to show you guys also, because it's just kind of wild here with all this. So this one, where is it? Hold on. Let me go back to this. Okay, so here's what's wild to me though, guys. So this is the case summary, right? So if you look at everything's business as usual, you know, offer of proof, alternate perpetrators, right? Objection to the juror question. Then we have notice of hearing. Then we have the order approving the still photographer, which is what we just read. And what's really crazy, check it out, all on its own by itself on the last page, all by itself. Look, isn't that eerie? Just all by itself like that? Jury trial. Anyway, but I did have some other thoughts. Let me see here. I wanted to share with you guys as I've been reflecting on this plea. Things I forgot to mention last night also. Thank you, Flash. Thank you. So do you guys remember when there was the pretrial hearing that I thought was so weird because Judge Hippler was so anal? Do you guys remember that? Where he was, you guys will remember this part, where he was like, in opening statements, you can either have the lights on or the lights off, and that whole thing, right? Like, just for one example, I was like, this is really weird. And he was like going through every little detail, and it was like, this is bizarre. I've just never seen micromanaging quite like this. At that hearing, he mentioned something about a deadline for any pleas that were offered or whatever to be on the record or something. Like it was the first time that we had heard anyone mention the word plea, right? But he said it in relation to a number of different things. And I remember specifically saying, because he rattled off like, any blah, blah, blah. And he listed a number of different types of filings, right? And then the last thing he said was any plea offers, right? And then whatever it was, be on the record by whatever the date, whatever it was. And of course they would be under seal. And I said on the live stream, I was like, don't worry, guys, in case anyone's like, wait, plea offers. I was like, calm down. That's not what that means. He's just saying it. And to be honest, like, that's still true, right? Like, he was saying it, basically, that's just court, that's procedure, right? Like, you say, were there never a plea deal or a plea offer or anything like that? That's like, it was grouped in, kind of like rattling it off like the way you would for every case, right? Just to make a thorough record and to, whatever. But it's funny because it was mentioned. So there's that. And then I've been thinking about what this potential plea, if this happens and whatever, what does this say about our jury system? And actually that reminds me, I meant to look up, hold on, let me see if I can pull this up. Let me see if I can find what I'm looking for here. And I find what I'm looking for. So there was a statement, where is it, from the prosecution that came out last night, and I'm going to try to find it. If you guys know where I can find it, let me know. And I'm not able to see it easily, but there's like so much news on this that doesn't really surprise me all that much. So let's see. Let me try this NPR. Oh my God, all the pop-ups in the world. Oh my God. I mean, they gave a statement, you guys. I'm just trying to find the statement from Bill Thompson. Let me see if I can find it, if I'm more specific. Because it really was telling to me. And I think this came out, either it came out or I heard it after I live streamed last night, or I would have totally brought it up, but it was right in line with my thoughts that I shared last night when we talked about this. So let's see here. Okay, I think I might have found it. Let's see. Just a second, guys. I'm just looking for it. Where is it? So the one that I'm looking for specifically, guys, let me know if y'all saw it. There was a statement from Bill Thompson and Ashley Jennings, and like and it was like them, I guess, addressing the victims' families. And the very first sentence in this statement or whatever said, instead of the very first sentence wasn't like, we're doing this for the victims' families, or we're doing this for justice, or whatever. The very first sentence from the statement that I saw last night said it was something akin to talking about how it was like, I was like, wow. It was like, in order to avoid a hung jury or a mistrial, it was talking, whatever it was literally addressing, it said hung jury and mistrial. Potential hung jury, potential mistrial. And I was like, oh my God, if that's not literally what I was saying last night, because you know what's so fascinating about that? One could say that the state would be offering a plea deal or accepting of a plea deal if they were like, sure, they could get a conviction, right? But not sure if they could get all 12 to go for the death penalty, right? And why do I say that? Because if you're the prosecution bringing forth a case to trial, and you guys have heard this from everybody, not just me, you should be 100% confident and that you're going to get a conviction. If you don't think your case is strong enough to get a conviction, you shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be going to trial. And we heard a lot of people, including us, talk about this in regards to Karen Reed, right? You should be 100% certain that you're going to get a guilty verdict and have confidence in your case. And if you think that there's holes in your case, and if you as the prosecutor can see reasonable doubt in your case, then what are you doing, right? So one would think, it would be logical to think that if you're the state of Idaho, right, in this case, that they're confident in their case, but like maybe not the death penalty, just because that's a whole different can of worms or whatever, right? The thing that's so interesting about that statement, and that it was their first sentence, and it mentioned hung jury or mistrial, is that has nothing to do with the death penalty. That's the guilt phase. That's not being able to get a conviction, right? And I was like, oh my God. Because what I was talking about last night, those of you guys who heard it, I was talking about how this feels to me like a game of chicken was going on, and that the only reason the state would be doing this is because they have doubts in their case. That's the only reason. I think that's also the reason why they went weasel mode and didn't talk to the families beforehand. And so they 100%. And then that statement came out, and I was like, holy shit. They didn't even say anything about, in the statement I saw, they didn't even say anything about, yeah, we're not sure that we could get all 12 people to be unanimous on the death penalty. That wasn't what they said. They said a mistrial or a hung jury. And so that's why I was saying, like, what this got me thinking about is, what does it say about the jury system, where you've got the prosecution who doesn't think their case is strong enough to get a conviction, right? But yet you have the defense thinking that even though there's a lot of problems with the state's case, right, that they are still thinking that odds are very high that a jury will convict, right? So what does that mean? It means that, in other words, you've got the prosecution essentially admitting that there's reasonable doubt, right? Essentially, that they're coming out and saying a mistrial and a hung jury. You never hear that from the state. Like that's crazy. So you have them saying that. Obviously, the defense would say there's holes in their case, right? So everybody, in other words, all the parties are in agreement. There's problems, major problems with the state's case. The state is not even confident they'll get a conviction. But yet you have the defense making a plea deal. The only reason would be to spare his life. And the only reason to do that would be because despite everyone in agreement that there's reasonable doubt, you still think a jury will convict. And that's the thing that sticks with me about this, is what does this say about the jury system right now? Like, how sad is that? If you've got the state admitting that there's problems with their case, but yet if you're the defense, you have so much doubt in jurors being able to be fair, that even if the state is showing them reasonable doubt that they can't see it, that they're going to see just the one. Remember when Ann Taylor kept saying the one thing? I hope it's not just the one thing. The one thing being the DNA on the knife sheath. And I would imagine that in whatever conversations were had by the defense, if indeed Bryan Kohberger is going to plead guilty, how much you want to bet that was that knife sheath, right? And it's like the one thing. And like, there can be problems here and there and everywhere that even the state is admitting and everybody can see it. But will the jurors will they just be laser focused? They hear about the knife sheath and opening statements, and that's it. They're just waiting for the trial to be over so they can convict. And what does that say about the jury system when even the state knows their case is, you never hear prosecutors say that, guys. Like, that is so crazy, right? Let me see what you guys are saying in the chat, as I've just been going off here on my whole like tangent. Not really a tangent, but Bunny says, I'm gutted. If you really did it and I was wrong, that's not it. I think this is the fifth tragedy. If you really did it and I was wrong, that's not it. Wait, what's not it? What's not it, Bunny? What's not what? Flash is appreciating Mary's awesome food pics. Love it. Yep, they're not confident in their evidence. Yep. If indeed the state was approached by the defense for this plea deal, it was clear from the statement that I saw that the state was like, thank God. That was 100% the vibe. That was what I got from it, because that was the first thing they said in their statement, which was a statement to address the victims' families. And the first thing they said was they said mistrial and hung jury. And that to me again says like, oh, thank God, right? Because they might have been, and this is if the state was approached by the defense, they might have just been like, oh my God, please, 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 right? Now, we still don't know. That's just what's been reported. Typically what happens in these kinds of things, right, guys, in these cases, is like the state makes an offer for a plea deal at some point along the way. And that kind of stays on the table. So in other words, a plea deal may have been offered from the state. Who knows when? It could have been right from the get-go, right? We don't know. And he can deny it, but they can always come back and say, hey, we changed our mind. You know what I mean? That's normally how it goes. Because here's the thing. If the state doesn't want to make a plea deal, the defense approaching the state and being like, hey, can we make a plea deal? They're not going to make a plea deal. There is no benefit for them to do that, right? So that's why typically the state offers it. Now, the other time that you might have it, for example, is like in a case like where you've got multiple co-defendants, right? Where you want someone to rat on the other one, right? But that's a whole different situation than what we're talking about here, right? When you have one defendant, then the only thing that can be negotiated is the charges, right? Or potentially the sentence. So it's not like, you would make a plea deal for, like, again, comparing it to the Adelsons, you make a plea deal with Katie McBanois to try to get information on, Charlie, whatever. I mean, they offered it to her and she turned it down. Dumbest thing ever, but whatever. So that's different. So versus, like, in other words, it's like when you're looking at what does each side stand to gain? If you're the state and it's just one defendant in a case, the state doesn't really stand to gain anything by making a plea deal. Unless when it's just the one defendant, unless they have doubts in their case, right? And from my experience and from everything that, I have learned legally. So, right. And that's right. Flash Breenan was confident. He was confident. He didn't have it was misguided, but he was definitely confident. Yep. And even after the fact, he's confident, So yeah, I mean, it's different prosecutors from who tried Lori Vallow, different prosecutors. It's at the same courthouse because both cases got a change of venue. Also Chad, they all went to Chad and Lori were tried at the Ada County Courthouse, which is also where we will be tomorrow, but different prosecutors. So Bunny, are you still here? And can you elaborate on what you said about where you said that's not it? Cause like, what were you talking about there? Apparently Mary made some banana bread that didn't go so well. You learn through mistakes, right? Okay. Bunny says, I'm gutted that it looks like he's taking this plea. I don't believe he did this, and that's tragic. It'll be interesting to see what happens tomorrow, right? Because it could go a lot of different ways, right? And I'm sure you guys have heard a lot of people talk about this, right? In terms of the allocution and what will be the terms of the plea deal. How much will we learn? How much will he have to say? There's all these different things that could go on. We might end up learning more than we knew, and we might not. It might just be as simple as he says, yes, I plead guilty, and that's it. But the thing that I will say is that I totally understand all the mixed feelings. And the part that is tough, right, is that when it comes to, like, for example, if you've got a situation where somebody's looking at, like, well, let's take Sarah Boone, for example, right? Where she was looking at possibly life, right? She got life. Yeah. She was looking at life, right? And she was offered that plea deal that, given how much time she'd already been in custody, she would have been out in, like, what, 6 years, 4 years, something crazy, right? She would have been out in a couple of years, basically, right? If she'd taken the deal and just pled guilty versus potentially life, which is what she ended up with. Or let's just say that you've got a situation where it's like, if you go to trial, you're looking at 10 to 20 years, but if you take the plea deal, 2 years, right? In other words, if whatever you have to gain is, like, markedly different than what you have to lose, then in those situations, you could see where somebody might actually not have done the thing, but where they might plead, because it's like, okay, and this is where kind of the Alford plea comes in, but whatever, where it's like, okay, like, it's not worth the risk, right? And the thing is, though, is when you're looking at this case, and this is what's interesting, right? Because it's like, it's life in prison. It's guaranteed life. It's 4 life sentences plus 10 years or whatever, right? It's like, it's interesting. It's hard to fathom that. And I think it would be highly unusual for someone who didn't do the thing to make that deal, Now, having said that, again, it's like, well, if you're like, I look at the evidence and the evidence, there's no way around it. And even though I didn't do it, the evidence makes it look like I did it, da, da, da. But again, that's where I just have to come back to. Even the state was like admitting that they didn't think they could secure a conviction. And that's why I come back to, what does it say about our jury system? I think for me, this plea, if it happens tomorrow and if he pleads guilty, I think that for me, at least at this juncture, what this plea says more about our jury system than it does about the defendant actually being guilty or actually having done the thing, right? Because that's really what it comes down to for me. Because whether he actually did it or actually didn't do it, the only reason that he's potentially, right, going to go through with this plea deal, the only reason when the state has admitted that they don't know if they can secure a conviction is because you don't have faith that the jury will be able to get past, for example, the one thing, to quote Ann Taylor, with the blood or the DNA on the knife sheath, right? And that they're just going to convict. And I come back to this, I said this last night, right? Think about like the Delphi jury versus the Karen Reed jury on trial number 2. And like I said last night, the Delphi jury, I guarantee you that if Richard Allen had been up for the death penalty, it's my personal opinion that jury would have totally given him the death penalty. You look at that jury, then you compare it to the Karen Reed jury, where they got it. They understood the assignment, completely different, right? And that's the thing, is that I wonder if in assessing this situation, if the defense maybe especially look at this, guys. Here's the other thing. Let me move this over here to the other thing. Also, welcome, Needs and Z's. I saw that you were here. Check this out, right? Or let's do this one. In the wake, a lot of people have had questions about the timing, right? And the timing isn't really that odd in terms of right before trial. That's typical. But I wonder if it's not, maybe there's more to it than that. In the wake of all this shit with the juror, like, look at this. I want you guys to take a look. The last 2 filings to come out on the docket prior to this notice of hearing were dealing with objections to the juror questionnaire. And I wonder if, in considering this, perhaps the defense's biggest consideration wasn't the defendant, and it wasn't maybe even so much the evidence, the state's evidence, because they've assessed that. They've been assessing that. They know that. They know what the evidence is, and they know what's coming in. They know what's not coming in for the most part. I wonder if it had to do with the jury, and they were just like, look, no matter what, set everything else aside, can we trust the jury to get past that knife sheath? And if you get a Karen Reed jury, I think you can. But if you get a Richard Allen jury, definitely not, in my opinion, right? And you could use other examples, but those are just 2 examples that you guys are well familiar with. Yeah, Mary said, I just said aloud, if he's innocent, he'd take the deal because the jury will convict him and the judge won't remove the death penalty. Right. And that's the other thing. And again, I mentioned this last night, right? That all along, the defense's goal, right, first and foremost, is to save his life. And if he takes this deal, they've achieved that, right? I mean, I think that's true also, Needs some season. I mean, for anyone who's just now getting here, I think that, again, if the defense approached the state, which I don't really think that's the case, because again, usually these offers are on the table and they're just waiting for the defense to come and accept it. But regardless, I think that the state was super fucking happy and like, wow, we lucked out, Welcome, Kane. Happy to see you. And welcome, Just Beth. Welcome, Leslie and Billy. Happy to see all you guys, girlfriends. It does all suck. I mean, here's what I will say. And I don't know if this will help you guys at all in terms of trying to see things from a positive light. I am very appreciative. What's the right word? I am relieved because I struggle with these cases Even Chad Daybell, guys. Even Chad. So in terms of the cases I've actually covered, right, and you guys know I'm covering a lot of death penalty cases. So far, there's only one case that I've covered where the defendant was convicted and has been sentenced to death. And I read all of the death penalty motions and the subsequent, how that all goes down with the warrant for the death penalty and all that. And I read all those for Chad Daybell. And I will just tell you, I don't know if you can tell on the live streams, it was really hard for me to even get through that. I don't care who it is. That's just me personally. I have a hard time with thinking that the government is killing people. I mean, I'm just going to leave it at that because I could just go on. So for me, I personally am really relieved that his life is spared. Personally, because I don't care who the person is. I can't handle it. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. His life is spared. And again, that has been their goal all along, first and foremost, is to save his life. And that will be achieved, so there you go. No, I don't think Chad Daybell's innocent. Are you kidding me? There's no person that you could name in history or currently alive, whether they've been on a trial or not. There's no person that I would be like, it's not going to bother me to think about the death penalty. I can't do it. So that's just me personally. Yeah, I mean, I don't think any more evidence is going to come out, just Beth, that, you know what I mean? I mean, I guess some of these filings might be unsealed over time, but the internet solving it won't do anything, because the thing is that if he takes his plea deal, right, he's waiving all of his appellate rights. Now there's a handful of exceptions, right? There's still like ineffective assistance of counsel. I don't think that's going to go very far. The bar for that is so high, in the sense that the bar is so low that, like, basically your counsel must have been, like, literally dead, essentially incapacitated. I've heard stories about how there's been counsel that was literally asleep during portions of the trial, and even then an ineffective assistance of counsel was denied. So it takes extreme situations. So very rarely happens. So is that going to happen in this case? I mean, I'm sure that we will see that appeal being made, but I don't think that's going to go very far. And I think he also has another route he can go. But in other words, you're waiving your right to appeal for like 99.9% of your grounds for appeal. So even if more evidence comes out, it doesn't really matter, like, what it is. It's not gonna, you can't really do anything about it, unfortunately. There's DJ Flashy Flash. Love it. Festive. And we'll learn more about this tomorrow, Just Beth. And actually, this was something I was thinking about. Let me see if I can pull this up. Let me see if we can get some more info on this. Perfect. You guys ready to learn? Let's learn. I think a lot of people have been talking about the terms of this plea and what it is and what it isn't. Let's actually learn from the source. I'm just waiting for this to load. Wait, what do you disagree? I don't know. It's not a bad thing. You guys are welcome to disagree, but I'm curious, what are you saying you disagree on? And then Needs thinks stuff is going to be sealed. Things are going to be sealed. Okay, we got fake Bruce in the house, in the hizzy. What up? All right. You guys ready? Let's take a look. This is Idaho specific, guys. So literally, this is the guilty plea advisory and form. This is from the idaho.gov rules form. So, like, literally, this is what Bryan Kohberger will be filling out tomorrow if he takes the guilty plea, okay? This same form that we're looking at right here. Okay. You guys ready? So, statement of constitutional rights. Please initial each response. This is great. Has anybody looked at this yet? Because it seems like this should have been a no-brainer, but we're going to look at it now. All right. You have the right to remain silent. You do not have to say anything about the crimes you are accused of committing. If you elect to have a trial, the state may not call you as a witness or ask you any questions. If you decide to testify, the state will be permitted to ask you questions, and anything you say can be used as evidence against you in court. I understand that by pleading guilty, I am waiving my right to remain silent as to the elements of the crimes to which I'm entering this plea. Okay. The elements of the crimes. Interesting. So in other words, he can't just, or any defendant, right? If they're going to plead guilty, they can't just say, yep, I did it. Yep, I'm guilty. They're going to have to answer as to the elements of the crimes. Now, does that mean motive, things like that? No. I mean, a defendant could offer that of their own volition, but the elements of the crimes, right? And I hopefully you guys are all well aware of what the elements of these crimes are, but we can go over that again if you guys want. It's been a long time since we've looked at that. So the elements of the crimes to which I'm entering this plea, and he will have to do that for each person, right? Because there's 4 separate counts for the homicides, and then there's the burglary. Number 2, the waiver of your right to remain silent only applies to your guilty plea to the crimes in this case. Even after pleading guilty, you will still have the right to refuse to answer any question or to provide any information that might tend to show you committed some other crimes. So in other words, you don't have to incriminate. Okay. If you want to incriminate yourself, go for it, right? But you don't have to provide any information that could incriminate you for other crimes. But in terms of the crimes that you're pleading guilty to, you're going to have to answer to each element, right? You can also refuse to answer or provide any information that might tend to increase the punishment for the crimes to which you're pleading guilty. Well, that's not going to really make a difference here. I understand that by pleading guilty to the crimes in this case, I still have the right to remain silent with respect to any other crimes and with respect to answering questions or providing information that may increase my sentence. And he has to initial with each of these lines here. You have the right to be represented by an attorney. Okay, we don't need to read that one. We know. You're presumed to be innocent. You will be found guilty if 1, you plead guilty in front of the judge, or 2, you are found guilty at a jury trial. I understand that by pleading guilty, I am waiving my right to be presumed innocent. 5, you have the right to speedy and public trial before jury trial between 12. Oh my God. Jury trial before 12 persons. A jury trial is a court hearing to determine whether you are guilty or not guilty of the charges brought against you. In a jury trial, you have the right to present evidence in your own defense and to testify in your own defense. You are not required to do so, however. The state must convince all of the jurors of your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I understand that by pleading guilty, I am waiving my right to a speedy and public jury trial. Welcome, Tanel. Happy to see you. Also welcome, Amelia. 6, the Sixth Amendment. You have the right to confront the witnesses testifying against you. This occurs during a jury trial. So here it's making the defendant really well aware of each right that they're waiving, right? Because by waiving these rights and taking a plea deal, guess what? They don't get to confront the witnesses. At trial, the state must prove its case by calling witnesses to testify under oath in front of you, the jury, and your attorney. Your attorney could then cross-examine, question each witness. You could also call witnesses of your choosing to testify on your behalf. If you do not have the funds to bring those witnesses to court, the state will pay the cost of bringing your witnesses to court and will compel their attendance by the use of subpoena power of the court. I understand that by pleading guilty, I am waiving my right to question, confront the witnesses against me, and present witnesses and evidence in my defense. So again, it's making them really cognizant of just how much they're waiving, right? I mean, spelling it out. Right. And we actually, Tanel, I know you just got here. We did touch on that at the beginning of the live stream. One of the things I mentioned early on was I said, do you guys remember when we covered that hearing? Because when I live streamed it, then when that was mentioned, when he brought up any plea deals or whatever on the table, I actually said, oh, don't freak out, everybody, because it was said in conjunction with a number of other things that were like standard par for the course, rattling off a list of things that you have to do just for the record. And in that context, it was like, it didn't say to me, oh, there is a plea deal. And the way he even said it was like, if any offers have been made or whatever, blah, blah. He may not have even been aware if there were any. However, it's also possible that this plea deal's been on the table from day one, right? It's also possible. But yes, it is interesting that he did mention that. And I brought that up at the beginning of the live stream. I was like, funny. And then Amelia saying, could this be a strategic legal move to quietly walk Bryan out the back door, saving face for the state while avoiding riots? And what do you mean by walking him out the back door? I do think it's I do think it's saving face for the state. And again, at the beginning of the live stream, I mentioned the statement that I had read last night, where their very first sentence referenced avoiding a mistrial or hung jury, which means that they literally admitted that they don't think they can even secure a conviction, which means they shouldn't be taking it to trial and they shouldn't be bringing these charges, as we know. So we talked about that in more elaborate detail earlier. Yeah, I think you're probably right about that, Needsamesies, that this could be devastating to Miss Massoth and Anne as well. Yeah. Again, I think that, again, the game of chicken, like I keep saying, I think the state, it's like a game of chicken because they, I think, were shaking in their boots, right, about this going to trial. And hoping that the defense would accept a plea deal, right? Because admittedly, that they don't think they can secure a conviction, or they're not sure they can. And B, potentially other issues that could arise that could have more significant effects, such as prosecutorial misconduct, whatever the case may be, right? And then again, in terms of the defense, in terms of the game of chicken, like I keep saying, I think for them, it's this whole thing, like I said, about the jury system and what type of jury how are we going to get a Richard Allen jury, or are we going to get a Karen Reed retrial jury? That type of thing. And I don't know much about the Central Park Five. I've heard of them, but anything that I've learned about them has been a long time ago. I don't really remember any details of that. And it's interesting, right? He totally could. However, the reason we started this live stream, right? Check it out. Just for anyone who's just now getting here. It's the first time we've seen this on the record from the court. It literally says change of plea hearing. He still could say not guilty, but literally that's why I have it highlighted for anyone I should have pulled this up anyway, because this is the first time we've seen it in writing. And this just came up a couple hours ago, or maybe even more recently, because I've been refreshing it repeatedly. And literally, I saw this on the docket at 10:30. And so I scheduled the live for 11 o'clock. But there it is in the work right there in writing from Judge Hippler, change of plea hearing. But he totally, he could say not guilty. He totally could. Tanel said, I wondered where that came from. What came from? Oh, you mean from like the title of the live stream, or from the thumbnail? Yeah, that's the whole thing. I don't know that anyone else really saw it, because again, it just came up, but like, it's a short filing. We already read it. There's not much to it, but the point being the change of plea hearing. Now it's in writing. Because again, prior to that, all we had was this nonsense. Notice of hearing, which the formatting's all weird, and that's all it says, and that's it. And we had only heard from the media anything related to a change of plea, right? Until now. Now it's in writing from the court. Well, that's true. However, that's right. He did have that. He did remain silent, but his counsel entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. Now, if he's going to plead guilty, he's not going to be able to remain silent. He's going to have to, because again, the colloquy is going to be, that's what we're looking at, right? It's huge. He's going to have to not just say guilty, but he's going to, like we said, he's going to have to describe to some extent the elements of each charge, right? Because he can't just say, yes, guilty. Like that's not enough. Okay. So I understand that by pleading guilty, I'm waiving my right to confront the witnesses against me and present witnesses and evidence in my defense. Number 7, the state has the burden of proving you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I understand that by pleading guilty, I am waiving my right to require the state to prove my guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Sad, right? Questions regarding ability to plead. Okay, please answer every question. If you do not understand a question, consult your attorney before answering. Again, for anyone who's like, what are we looking at? This is literally the Idaho guilty plea form that they're going to have to fill out tomorrow. He's going to have to fill out tomorrow if he pleads guilty. This is the exact form. So do you read and write the English language? Okay, we don't need to go through all this stuff, right? Like just basically, are you competent to answer for this stuff? Have you taken any drugs? Are you under the influence of alcohol? Okay. Are you capable of understanding these proceedings? Do you claim that you are mentally incapable of understanding these proceedings or what it means to plead guilty to a crime? Is there anything going on in your life that affects your ability to enter a voluntary guilty plea? Are you having any difficulty in understanding what you are doing by filling out this form? Is there any other reason that you cannot make a reasoned and informed decision in this case? That's a good question. Is there any other reason that you cannot make a reasoned and informed decision in this case? Interesting. Oh, if yes, what is the reason? And look, ample space, well, a fair amount of space to answer that. Interesting. Interesting. All right, plea agreement. Ready, guys? Is your guilty plea the result of a plea agreement? If so, what are the terms of that plea agreement? If available, a written plea agreement must be attached here to as addendum A. And this is, here's what I will say. I do like that here the defendant has to answer this question in their own words and write it out. That's really important to me because what they're saying, what they're asking the defendant, it's not just a check box, right? What are the terms? You have to explain the terms of the plea agreement in your own words. I'm glad they asked that question because there's a lot of people who maybe don't really understand what's going on. And I think this is the right, I appreciate that, right? I appreciate that. It's like when you're in school and it's like you got multiple choice or whatever, but then you've got like the essay part, right? And it's like, you better be able to actually talk about the shit. It's like the essay portion, short, what do they call it? Short answer, whatever it's called. Anyways, okay. If a written plea agreement was done, have you read this plea agreement? Do you understand your plea agreement? There are two types of plea agreements. Ooh. Please initial the one paragraph below which describes the type of plea agreement. Okay. A, I understand that my plea agreement is a non-binding plea agreement. This means that the court is not bound by the agreement or any sentencing recommendations and may impose any sentence authorized by law up to the maximum sentence. Because the court is not bound by the agreement, if the district court chooses not to follow the agreement, I will not have the right to withdraw my guilty plea. So let's just say, for an example, what this would mean is, let's just say that somebody, the state and the prosecution and the defense have made a deal and they're like 10 years for, I don't know, some sort of, I don't know, let's just say Grand Theft Auto. I don't know. Grand Theft Auto. Let's just go with that. All right. Something like that. And they've made an agreement for 10 years, but like, let's just say that had they gone to trial, the max was 40 years. Right? If they have a non-binding plea agreement, it means that the court doesn't have to follow what the prosecution and the defendant agreed on. He could still go with the 40 years. He could choose, or he could do less. He or she may impose any sentence authorized by law up to the maximum sentence if you do this non-binding plea agreement. That sounds terrible. I don't know why anyone would do that. Number B, or letter B. I understand that my plea agreement is a binding plea agreement. This means that if the district court does not impose the specific sentence as recommended by both parties, I will be allowed to withdraw my plea of guilty and proceed to a jury trial. Interesting. So let's talk about the implications here. So, for example, let's take Bryan Kohberger and look at this. So, if Bryan Kohberger, right, in his defense, and then the prosecutor, they've all agreed, okay, we've agreed, life in prison, LWOP, that's what it is, da da da. And let's just say that it's a non-binding plea agreement, right? And I don't think this would be like, okay, in this particular case, I don't think this is a concern because the court cannot authorize or cannot sentence death without it being from a jury verdict. But to give the example, it would be like saying that Judge Hippler could say, well, fuck that. I'm still going to give him the death penalty and you can't withdraw your plea. But if you have a binding plea agreement, right? Like here again, it would be, okay, the recommended sentence from both parties, they both recommend life without parole, da da da. And then if the court does not impose that sentence, and it would have to be that they go higher, right? But then they can withdraw their plea. So that's interesting. What do you guys think about that? Oh, that's interesting. Amelia says in the Central Park 5, they told the media it was a plea deal, but it was not a plea deal. The real killer came forward. Interesting. So they can get to a higher court. They'll accept the plea so they can get to a higher court. But I don't really know what they would benefit from that, right? Because like there's not really a whole lot. Well, and that's kind of why we're looking at this, right? To see what the terms are. Now, this may not lay it all out, where we will find out, right? But we will hear it tomorrow what the terms are. Because again, the whole thing is like, what all are you waiving in terms of appeal? Right. That's true. That's true. But just Beth is saying that you can still have avenues for like habeas corpus. Yeah. Actual innocence. Right. That's true. That's true. That's different though than your standard direct appeals that you would have. That's different. Like, for example, if they test some other thing and later on and they determine, like how this happens, right? And it's like, oh, we found the real killer. Like that would not happen due to an appeal. That would just happen due to like a habeas petition. Of course, yeah, that could still happen, but that's different. That's a different mechanism than a direct appeal. So okay, number 18, has your attorney or anyone else forced or coerced you in any way into accepting this plea agreement? Have any other promises been made to you that have influenced your decision to plead guilty? Has anyone told you what your sentence will be? If so, what have you been promised? Is this a conditional guilty plea in which you are reserving your right to appeal any pretrial issues? This is a conditional guilty plea. Interesting. Let me read that one again. Number 21. Let me zoom in. So I don't know that this would apply here. I don't know that the state would accept a conditional guilty plea, but let's just read this just to see that this could happen. Is this a conditional guilty plea in which you are reserving your right to appeal any pretrial issues? In other words, this could happen in Idaho where they situate a plea such that they still do have a right to appeal any pretrial issues. Now, again, my understanding is that's not going to happen here, but there it is on the form as a possibility, right? Have you waived your right to appeal your judgment of conviction as part of your plea agreement? Have you waived your right to appeal your sentence as part of your plea agreement? Under what condition can you appeal your sentence? Do you understand that by pleading guilty, you will waive or give up any defenses, both factual and legal, that you believe you may have in this case? I'm going to read that one again. Do you understand that by pleading guilty, you will waive or give up any defenses, both factual and legal, that you believe you may have in this case? Have you discussed the elements of the offenses for which you are charged with your attorney? Potential sentence. I don't know why they couldn't format this so that this starts on the next page, but whatever. I am charged with the crimes of, and then they have to list them. Oh, interesting. I understand the minimum and maximum, and then they have to write it in. It's short answer or whatever, not multiple choice. If you plead guilty to more than one crime, do you understand that your sentences for each crime could be ordered to be served either concurrently at the same time or consecutively, one after the other? Do you understand that if you plead guilty and you commit crimes in the future, this conviction could be considered in the future case and could cause more severe penalty in the future case? And then additional consequences of a guilty plea. Are you currently on probation or parole? Also, let me just see what you guys are saying in the chat. Hello, Stevie B. Welcome. Happy to see you. I mean, he does have a ton of issues to raise on appeal if he doesn't waive them as part of the plea, which is my understanding is that you waive basically all of your appellate rights. But we're getting into this, as you guys can see. Okay, are you currently on probation or parole? If so, do you understand that a plea of guilty in this case could be the basis of a violation of that probation or parole in all caps and bold, which means that any suspended sentence could be imposed and any parole revoked? Are you aware that if you are not a citizen, okay, some of this doesn't apply. We're not going to read this. There's such sex offender. Okay. Are you aware that if you plead guilty, you may be required to pay restitution in this case? Are you pleading guilty to a crime for which you may be required to pay the cost of prosecution and investigation? That sucks. If so, have you and the state agreed upon the amount of this reimbursement? If you have, what is the amount? Have you agreed to pay restitution as a condition of your plea agreement? If the amount of restitution has not been agreed upon, do you understand that you cannot withdraw your guilty plea, even if the restitution amount is determined to be higher than you thought it might or should be? Is a license suspension required as a result of a guilty plea in this case? Do you understand that if you plead guilty, you will be required to submit a DNA sample and a right thumbprint impression to the state? Are you pleading guilty to a crime for which the court could impose a fine for a crime of violence up to $5,000 payable to the victim of the crime? Do you understand that if you plead guilty to a felony, you will lose your right to vote in Idaho during the period of your sentence? Do you understand that if you plead guilty to a felony, you will lose the right to hold public office in Idaho during the period of your sentence? Do you understand that if you plead guilty to a felony, you will lose your right to perform jury service in Idaho during the period of your sentence? Do you understand that if you plead guilty to a felony and or to a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence, you will lose your right to purchase, possess, or carry firearms? Do you understand that by pleading guilty to a felony, you run the risk that if you have new felony charges in the future, you could be charged as a persistent violator? In North Carolina, they call it a repeat offender. Relationship with your attorney. Have you had sufficient time to discuss this case with your attorney? Your case with the attorney. Have you had adequate time to fill out this form? Have you had adequate access to your attorney's assistance in filling out this form? Your attorney can obtain various items from the prosecutor relating to your case. This may include police reports, witness statements, tape recordings, photographs, reports of scientific testing, etc. This is called discovery. I think he's well familiar with that. Have you had the opportunity to review the discovery provided by your attorney? Do you want your attorney? Now, what's interesting is, everything else aside, he could say no to this. I will just say, he could say no to this. You guys, right? Given everything that we've heard, he could say no to this. And if he does, what happens? I don't know. Like, what if everything else, checking all the boxes, but then he gets to this one, he's like, no, I haven't had enough time. Why? Because there's so much discovery and all the terabytes and whatnot, right? Just like for the motion to continue. And what if he says no? I don't know. Like, interesting question, right? Is it like, well, too bad because you checked yes for everything else? Or is it like, we give you a day? I don't know. But what I'm saying is it wouldn't surprise me if, I feel like that would be valid, right? Do you want your attorney to take any further action in this case? Hi, Flash. Hi, Super Planner Girl. It's not over till it's over, right? Absolutely. Anything's still possible. Also, welcome. Happy to see you. If you are not okay, we don't need to read the ones about being a citizen. Do you understand that no one, including your attorney, can force you to plead guilty in this case? Are you satisfied with your attorney's representation? If not, please state why you are dissatisfied. So you have to imagine, right? If he says yes here, and this is why we always hear this in these different colloquies, right? If he says yes to this, you guys see where I'm going with that in terms of raising any ineffective assistance of counsel or what have you later on down the road, which again, the standard for that is basically your attorneys have to be deceased and sitting at counsel table. Nonetheless, also welcome to anyone else who's in the chat that I missed because I'm reading all this and it's hard to read the chat and read the documents at the same time. If your guilty plea is the result of a plea agreement reached through mediation, well, that's not relevant here. So we're going to skip that part. Entry of plea. Are the answers throughout this form your own answers? Are you entering your plea freely and voluntarily? Do you understand the consequences of entering a guilty plea? Are you admitting to all the elements of the crimes to which you are pleading guilty? Or are you pleading guilty because you're entering an Alford plea? Also, shout out to North Carolina because the Alford plea hails from North Carolina case law. Sweet. If you are entering an Alford plea, do you understand that the court will consider you just as guilty as if you enter a non-Alford plea? Have you had any trouble answering any of the questions in this? Oh my God. How is there a typo of all things in this? Potentially one of the most important things a defendant could fill out in their fucking lifetime, and they left the T off of the word this. Does that not just say it all, though, about Idaho right now? Jesus Christ. Could they not have had someone proofread this? Could they not have had AI proof? Never mind. Let's just keep reading. This form, which you could not resolve by discussing the issues with your attorney. God, the formatting too. But honestly, leaving the T off of this. If you were provided with an interpreter, okay, that doesn't apply here. Do you need any additional time before you enter your guilty pleas? And then in bold and underlined, do you understand that if the court accepts your guilty plea, that you may not be able to withdraw your pleas at a later date? Is there anything else you want to tell the court about why you are pleading guilty? I've answered the questions on pages 1 through 8 of this guilty plea advisory form truthfully. I understand all of the questions and answers herein. I have had the opportunity to discuss each question and answer with my attorney, and I have completed this form freely and voluntarily, and then in bold and all caps, with a complete understanding of the charges to which I am pleading guilty and with knowledge of the potential consequences of this plea. Furthermore, no one has forced me or threatened me to plead guilty. And then sign and date it. Post plea rights. Okay. Let's see. Stevie B saying the only way I would ever be satisfied with this outcome is if it requires him to reveal the facts and details of the crime. They can't require that. Like I pointed out earlier, as per this form, he's going to have to, if he pleads guilty, he's going to have to plead guilty, not just in general, like I'm guilty. He's going to have to plead guilty to each element of each charge, right? But that's different from having to reveal all the facts and details, like, the things that we don't have answers to. He cannot be forced to do that. A defendant, if they're pleading, now they can offer that. They have that option to do that, but they cannot be forced to do that. But I know a lot of people feel that way. And I would love for you to elaborate on why, because that's one thing that I don't quite, I would just love for you to elaborate on why you feel like that makes a difference. Is it just because it's like, we all feel like we were waiting for trial to learn so much, and now we are all like, we're not going to learn the things? Or like, I'm just wondering why. I'm just like wondering. Or is it because you feel like you don't believe that he is really guilty unless he can fully admit to these details that no one else would know? I don't know. I'm just brainstorming as to what, because a lot of people have voiced that opinion, but I don't really know what the sentiment is there. So, okay. Post plea rights. I almost said post plea rights. Okay. A pre-sentence investigation will be ordered by the court unless both you and the state waive that report and the court approves that waiver. The court may order evaluations as part of this investigation, and these reports will be used to determine your sentence. You have the right to remain silent during all proceedings and interviews from now until sentencing, which includes the pre-sentence investigation and any court ordered evaluations. So Lori Vallow did that, right? Normally, you want to comply with like the pre-sentencing evaluation because that usually goes in your favor. And Lori Vallow said she would comply, and then she sat there and like did that thing like a kid would do, and like kept her lips closed and like looked at the clock or whatever. That's my understanding, and like just said she was going to comply and then didn't comply and just like wasted people's time. Anyway, so Stevie B is saying the family deserves the answers and motives. I mean, I understand that, but like, legally speaking, that's not even really the purpose of a trial, let alone a plea deal, right? Because there's plenty of things that might seem like they are really super fucking important to understanding some, for example, motive, right? That will never come in at trial because they're inadmissible, right? Does that, you guys see where I'm going with that? Like, the purpose of a trial is not to answer all of the questions, especially as it pertains to motive, right? The state can offer a theory of motive, but they don't have to. But that's not really the purpose of it, right? It's just simply, can the state prove the elements of the crimes as charged beyond a reasonable doubt? So considering that in mind, right, legally speaking, that even if even the purpose of a trial isn't to give all the answers, and tell me why, like, here's why, that's not even the purpose of a trial, then you can see why I can understand how people feel that way. But pleading guilty is obviously even further away from that, being that it's a defendant waiving all of these rights as we've just gone over, right? And part of that being that in doing so, they're waiving their jury trial where evidence that would be presented against them will not happen, right? I mean, on the flip side, they lose the opportunity to present their own case in chief, right? But you guys see what I'm saying, hopefully. Exactly, yeah. Don't have to prove motive, yep. And I understand the family deserves ample. And the thing is this, right? I don't know. It's just sort of like an existential question, but in any like really serious crime, does the family ever get the truth? I mean, how many, like, let's think about this, guys. How can you guys think of a time where there's been a criminal defendant who's been convicted, right? and has truthfully given the family, or given anybody, right, has truthfully answered all the questions, as in that they did it, the how, the why, and like totally like, here we go, like, you know, almost like a confessional. I'm thinking like not from a forced confession, like an interrogation. I'm thinking more like picturing a movie where they go to the, you know, I don't know, like an actual legit confession, right? Or whatever. I don't feel like that word just makes me think of an interrogation. So that's not really the way I want to. You guys see what I'm saying? They're like, has anybody ever done that? Has anybody ever actually fully disclosed in complete honesty? I mean, because I can't think of a single example, but I'm curious if you guys have any. Yeah, I agree, Amanda. That makes sense. She says, I think it would just feel better in its own weird way to have it feel more solid. Yeah, I mean, totally. But the problem is it's just not something that's possible, right? Like the things, that's the thing about this stuff, right? Is like the things that will make it feel like there's closure. I don't know that there's a way to really achieve that through trial or no trial or whatever, right? Do we ever really get, you know, for the victims' families or for the public or whatever, is there really, will we ever feel like it's all resolved, you know? I mean, take Karen Reed, okay? You know, I think everybody here probably is on board with the fact that, you know, her being acquitted of all charges apart from the OUI was 100% amazing moment for everybody, right? And was justice. But we have no idea what happened to John O'Keefe, and we will never know. You know what I mean? So in terms of the answers, we have no answers. We have fewer answers. You know what I mean? Just as an example, you know? Now, having said that, no, Needsome's, I understand what she's saying, right? That it's about the defendant's rights, not the. However, apparently Idaho has some sort of Victims' Rights Act that does give victims some rights, and I don't think every state has one of these. Now, they don't trump or outweigh or override the defendant's rights, you know. But it is something that I learned, I think maybe yesterday, or maybe, I don't know, recently. I feel like that Idaho does have this special. Let me see if I can pull it up. I don't know if special is the right word. And it looks like it happened in 2018. Yeah, they have a whole manual on the rights of, oh wait, the victims of crime. Yeah, I guess that's the one. Here we go. Idaho victims' rights laws. I'm just looking here. So yeah, they do, in other words, yeah. They do have some rights, but it's nothing like the defendant's rights. So yeah. Right. I see Stevie B saying, I get that, but seeing how many family members are against the deal, prosecution should try to get those answers out. Well, whether family, okay, first of all, whether the family members are against the deal or for the deal or whatever the case may be, I'm sure they all want answers, first of all. But second of all, again, we don't know what answers would be revealed at trial, because anything that comes into evidence is going to be subject to cross-examination. We'll never know, right? Like, we'll never know what answers could have been or would have been, because they're not going to happen if this plea deal goes through. And then thirdly, should do or should try or should happen, and what will, can, or illegally is possible. Those are all different things, right? So again, they cannot force that. If he wants to volunteer it, he can, but they can't legally, they cannot force him to just like, yeah. And think of it this way too, guys, right? Imagine a situation where somebody was taking a plea deal, and part of the plea deal, right, was that they have to give the family all the answers. And let's just say, this is hypothetical, that family gets to ask them all the questions they want to know. Tell me why. Tell me where the knife is, whatever the case may be, right? Whatever their questions are. And that the defendant pleading guilty is forced to answer them, forced to, as part of the plea. How would you know that any of that is actually truthful? And there would never be any way to check that. In other words, if they're incentivized to make the plea deal no matter what, they could easily make that shit up, and no one will ever even be the wiser, because nobody has those answers, right? Like if somebody were, for example, if you're grilling, if it's like, okay, you're the victim's family and you get to ask the defendant why, and they say, because Santa Claus told me to do it. Well, maybe I shouldn't say Santa, because Bill Thompson. Oh, because, you know, I don't know. anything. The tooth fairy told me to do it. Whatever it is, no one can ever prove it correct or incorrect. So in other words, is there really any type of, can you ever have any closure from that? You see what I mean? Does that make any type of sense to you guys? So your planner girl saying there's no justice for a crime like this. Gave a sentence statement at his sentencing. AM. Oh, Alex Murdoch. Right. I know. 100%. That's right. That's right. It was so shitty and selfish. Yes, it was. That's an understatement. Now in Idaho, it's part of the victim's rights thing I was talking about. In Idaho, the state is supposed to consult the family first. In Idaho, it's part of their Victims' Rights Act thing. Now, it doesn't mean that they have to go with whatever the victims' families want. And of course, here you've got 4 separate families. But they are supposed to consult them first, which is interesting because they didn't do that from what we know. And I mean, I wonder if that's going to have any other repercussions for the state, right? I mean, not that would be separate from anything related to Bryan Kohberger, but in other words, can they face repercussions for violating this Victims' Rights Act because they did not, to our knowledge, consult the victims first? Again, they don't have in Idaho, because of that Victims' Rights Act, they don't have to do. And I mean, in other words, it's really kind of irrelevant, right? It's like it's not like the family's going to say, here's what we want, and then they do it. It's like a courtesy thing, right? You consult them so that they feel like they're involved, and you get their input and blah, blah, blah. And in the end, the prosecution might make a completely different decision, but at least the family will have felt like they were heard, right? And that's what matters to the family. The family wants to feel like they are heard. I mean, even if the prosecution goes with a completely different route than what the family wants, if the family feels like they were heard, that's going to go a long way versus not being heard and also not, going forward with whatever it is that the family wants, if that makes sense. Yeah, 100%. I agree. Needs some Z says victims' families don't deserve explanations of a crime against a family member. Is legitimate to want it? Absolutely, but not realistic. 100%. And again, like I was saying, like, would you ever get the answers anyway? Great example, right? Because Nate Eaton interviewed Lori Vallow. I'm sure many of you guys saw that. And, I think it was, I saw, or not saw, but I listened to when I was driving home today, him being on Lawyer, and it was really interesting because one of the things that they talked about is like, literally, would you ever get the truth from her anyway, right? I mean, and she's an extreme example for various reasons. But again, the same thing. It's like, under what circumstance would a defendant, or if they're convicted, right, would they ever reveal all those answers? And honestly, it's like, yeah, you can see how if they're pleading guilty, that would maybe be the last time they would do it. But yeah, and how would you? And like I said, and even if they give the answers, let's, in an imaginary world, if they were forced to do, like the hypothetical situation I gave earlier, where the hypothetical being that the victims' families can ask whatever they want, and then it's like, as part of the plea deal, you have to answer it. How would you would never know if any of that was accurate or truthful or not, right? And I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Yep. The family will never get, that has to come from within themselves. Absolutely. Absolutely does. And that's the thing, right? Because they're really, and in terms of the death penalty, we've talked about this quite a bit on this channel, right? But the statistics show that there's actually a huge harm that tends to come from families that are in favor of the death penalty. And then if they're still alive and that finally happens, that they actually tend to become like, feel so much worse after, because it's like they've been waiting decades or whatever, expecting, or not, maybe not expecting, but thinking there was going to be either some kind of closure, or thinking that they were going to feel something to make them feel not shitty or less shitty, right? Like whatever it is that their emotion is, they're thinking that when this time comes, if I can just hang on till this time, I will feel different than I feel now. And they wait and they wait and they wait, and there's all these different things, and but then because they waited for so long for this and thought it would give them a certain thing, it's like actually worse when that thing happens, because then the opposite happened. Does that make any type of sense? Again, we've read through that on different live streams looking at the death penalty. And it's very interesting on the statistics on that. So, I mean, clearly the prosecution honestly doesn't give a shit about the families, because they weaseled they weaseled this. They were supposed, like I said, according to the Idaho victims' right, they were supposed to consult them, and they didn't. And I think they didn't do it for a reason, because they knew that they would get pushback, and they wanted to be able to get this plea deal because, again, as we heard, or I read in a statement last night from the prosecution, they are not sure they can even secure a guilty verdict. And so that's where the weaselness comes in. It doesn't. Yeah. So needs to be saying, I can't imagine that victims' rights in any way included criminals' motives and deal. They don't. It does not. It does not at all. Nope. The victims' rights means that, like I said, they are supposed to be consulted before negotiating any plea. And they're supposed to be like aware of any plea negotiations that are going on. They also have the right to be present at any like sentencing hearing or whatever. They have the right to speak. Those are the main ones. Again, I'm going to see if I can find the exact specific one. Let's see here. But that's the main things that I'm aware of. Let's see. So each victim should be treated with fairness, respect, dignity, privacy, permitted to be present at all criminal justice proceedings, entitled to a timely disposition of the case. We've heard that being mentioned. Given prior notification of trial court, appellate, probation, and parole proceedings, and upon request to information about the sentence, incarceration, placing on probation, or release of the defendant. Heard upon request at all criminal justice proceedings, considering a plea of guilty. You guys, there it is. Let me read that again. Heard upon request at all criminal justice proceedings, considering a plea of guilty, sentencing, incarceration, placing on probation, or release of the defendant unless manifest injustice will result. And here's what I will say. So it does say upon request, but I guarantee you the family, at least we know some of the families 100% requested this, if not all. Afforded the opportunity to communicate with the prosecution in criminal or juvenile offenses and be advised of any proposed plea agreement by the prosecuting attorney prior to entering into a plea agreement in a criminal case, in criminal offenses. Allowed to refuse an interview. I mean, those are the main things that were in what matters here, right? Let's see what else. Notified whenever the defendant or suspect is released or escapes from custody. Some of these only matter if somebody's going to be getting released and going on parole. The provisions of this section shall apply equally to the immediate families of homicide victims or immediate families of the victims of such youthful age or incapacity. Okay, kids, I guess is what it's saying. To set aside or avoid a finding of guilt or acceptance. And here's how they define victim: an individual who suffers direct or threatened physical, financial, or emotional harm as a result of a commission of a crime. So there you go. There you go. So yeah, no motives, no details. That's not a part of it. I mean, 100%, Amanda says, complicates it more that 2 out of the 4 families are okay with the decision. Right. And again, Stevie, I understand that how you feel. Stevie's saying, I also feel he should have to provide certain. That's fine. You know, it's never going to happen, and it's not legal. In fact, that would violate constitutional rights, among other things. And in fact, the plea that we just read through here, I mean, literally outlines the extent to which they have to say. And let's go back in case anyone missed it, because this was from the beginning of this. So at the very, oh my God, come on, let's scroll. The thing that, in other words, out of this entire form that we read, which is what they're going to have to use tomorrow, if he pleads, the thing that gets into the most he would have to admit to is where we're going to read it right now for anyone who missed it, if it will let me scroll. Come on. The waiver, okay. Even after pleading guilty, you still have the right to refuse to answer any question or to provide any information that might tend to show you committed some other crimes. You can also refuse to answer or provide any information that might tend to increase the punishment for the crimes to which you're pleading guilty. So there you go. So you don't have to, provide more details. But then there's the one part, where is it? Here, let me do Control F myself. Okay, here it is. This is the one I was looking for. I understand that by pleading guilty, I'm waiving my right to remain silent as to the elements of the crimes. Oh, wait, hold on. That's not the one. There's more than one of these. Are you admitting to all the elements? Have you discussed the elements? Where was it? Hold on. Oh my God. Well, I talked about it quite a bit earlier. Where is it? My eyes are deceiving me. There's a part where it says that they have to outline and plead guilty to each element of each charge and not just overall saying, yes, I'm guilty. And that is as specific as any of this gets. Let's see here. I feel like, I feel my recollection is that it was early on in this whole thing. But anyways, yeah, I feel like it was, let's just double check. I understand that pleading guilty, I'm waiving. Okay, I know, literally stupid me. Sorry. Okay, let me go back to this. I understand here, it was right here. I understand that by pleading guilty, I'm waiving my right to remain silent as to the elements of the crimes to which and I'm entering this plea. This is as much as they can require, it's not even require. It's just that what he's waiving, if he does do this, he's waiving his right to remain silent as to the elements of each of the crimes. That's the part that this is as specific as he can be legally bound to answer, if that makes sense. Because again, you can't just say, like, if they say, okay, first degree murder, and they give the statute, he can't just say guilty. Like, in other words, he can, and it looks like, have to plead guilty to the specific elements of each crime. But that's not then that's as specific as it legally he can be required to be. Again, he can always offer more. Will he? Yeah, I'm sure no. But yeah, they were made aware. So I guess they were made aware technically before the hearing, right? I suppose. But I don't know. What was the email? It sounded, the way that they said it, well, the way Steve Gonsalves said it, it was like, I mean, I guess really what it is there was a leak, right? Like, how did we even, okay. In terms of whenever they got their email, it was before there was anything official on the court record about anything related to a plea, because literally that happened just a couple hours ago. But if it's like, if you're saying, okay, well, did they get their email before the leak or whatever it was? Let's see, Friday. Okay, presented the plea on Sunday. So technically they were given a heads up. Is that right then? It looks like. I mean, yeah, if it was mentioned on Friday and the plea was presented on Sunday without input, I think that still counts as being adequate because at least they were told about it. My understanding was like they were not told about it and they found out from the media, but that was my understanding. And there's just, again, it's just been a shit show of all the stuff. And I also don't like watch Steve Gonsalves, as you guys know. It's just, I'm just reading what you guys are saying in the chat. Yeah, they were made aware. Okay. Yeah, they were made aware on Friday and Sunday. So Sunday is when it was talked about, I guess, with the parties. Yeah, they did find it out from the media. What day of the week is it? Hold on. When did this all come? This all came down yesterday. Yesterday was Monday. Anyways, I don't know. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I mean, and really, innocence and guilt is irrelevant anyway, right? As we know, legally speaking, right? Legally speaking, it's can the state prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, right? As we know. But whether somebody is seeking, I want to, if somebody's like, okay, I want to try to figure out how do I feel, where do I stand? Do I think he's innocent or do I think he's guilty? Or if somebody is like, okay, I want to know, like, is he guilty or not guilty, right? Or if somebody's like, oh, I wonder if the state can prove their case, regardless of which camp anybody is or isn't in, any of those would only be satisfied through a jury trial, right? We would need a jury trial. And now it looks like we're not going to have that. So, yep. Oh, they didn't find out from the media. Okay. They found out from the prosecution. Okay. Didn't they say they found out from the media? Anyway, I don't know. Again, I've heard it through osmosis. I've not paid attention because I don't like seek those statements out from Steve and whatnot. But so we looked at, so there's the Victims' Rights Act. Yeah, so just again, for anyone who missed it, there it is, the change of plea hearing. So that'll be tomorrow. I will cover that tomorrow night because I will be at the law firm, probably trying to listen on in. Actually, it's really funny because one of the attorneys today came in to work this morning and he goes, I heard your boy's pleading, gonna take a plea deal or whatever. It's just really funny. He's only saying that because he knows it's a case that I'm covering. But it's just funny because they're kind of trying to pay attention to the cases that I'm covering so they can be like up on it. Because they have their own crazy cases that are insane, that are just as crazy and exciting and whatever as anything that we follow, by the way. If you guys only knew. But anyways, I will try to tune in if I can, and especially if nothing's really going on, sort of depends. As it's happening. Not that that matters to you guys. I'm just thinking in my mind because I don't want to miss anything. But we will cover this tomorrow night after the fact. And whatever happens will happen. And like the song, que sera, sera, whatever will be. And yeah, that will be what happens. What is lifers? I don't know what that is. Okay, thank you. Yeah, again, Steve said out of his own mouth, I don't listen to his mouth, so I appreciate you relaying that information to me. The way that I learn what Steve said is through other people saying what Steve said and not from what Steve said. So I appreciate that. Good night, Mary. Thanks for being here as always. You're welcome. You're welcome, Bunny. You're very, very welcome. Hopefully that was helpful. At least now I'm glad we took a really good look at this plea agreement, right? So we saw what that looks like. We saw the Victims' Rights Act. I think we have a good idea in terms of, instead of just speculation or whatever, of what actually is going to be relevant, at the hearing tomorrow. What are they going to be using, in terms of the procedure? And I think we hopefully are a little bit more informed now. I know I feel like I'm more informed as well. Speaking of that, well, you have your command, right? Yeah, Steve Gonsalves is the father of one of the victims. He's been very, very outspoken since the beginning. I would say like a frequent face, if you will. Very outspoken. That's a way to say it. So, and I appreciate everybody being respectful and kind to one another and keeping an open mind. We will get through this together, guys. And you know what? And the thing is by being kind and seeing things from the other perspectives, it's just so important, right? And so I just appreciate that. And I think we all can learn from seeing the other, other perspectives, right? And there's a lot of this is not an easy one, right? Because there's just a lot going on. But we are all on our own, I guess, path, if you will, whatever you want to say, to try to, be better people, hopefully, right? And to find closure and to, I guess I can speak for myself, but like always to be like the best version of myself, if you will. Anyway, it's just in terms of like when it was brought up about the families, right? That the closure can only come from within. I do hope that they find the closure that they're seeking, however they can find that. And I know that will not be tomorrow or anytime soon. And that's totally understandable. So I've not seen any stories about how he's been treated. I've not seen a single thing. I figured he was probably in like protective custody or whatever, right? But anyway, yeah, I have no idea. Hearing starts in 12 and a half hours. Oh my God. Yeah. Wow, guys. Wow. Yep. We are not trying to fight, just different friendly and different opinions. Yep. It's the squirrels of the world, right? Squirrels of the world. Make the world go around. Make the world a better place by being appreciative of all perspectives, all different squirrels of the world. You know what I mean? So yeah, but thanks so much everybody for being here. We will follow back up with this tomorrow. Love y'all. Y'all are the best. Thanks so much again for being the best squirrels on the planet and in the universe. Love y'all. And we'll be back together here shortly. But until then, squirrel out.